We're in there.
Sweet, dude. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, this place is already awesome. I'm so glad I kind of discovered it. Now I get to really discover it.
For sure, dude. Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, so if you want to introduce yourself to the hopping world?
Yeah, so I'm Austin Jevne, founder of Forager Brewing Company and head brewer at Humble Forager Brewing Company.
Cool. And I just hitchhiked down here from Minneapolis.
Sweet.
It's a success.
Nice. How'd that go?
It was pretty good. My buddy dropped me off south of the city, and there was a little bit of construction, which is kind of a issue. So I had to walk like a mile or two just to get past people could pull over. And then one guy picked me up, and I was like, "I'm going to Rochester." He's like, "Great, I'm going to Budapest." I'm like, "What?" He's driving to Madison to hop on a plane and go to Budapest.
Nice. That's interesting. He's not flying out of Minneapolis to go to Budapest.
Yeah, it is. Because he was coming from north of Minneapolis, too. It's even stranger.
Yeah, that's super odd. I grew up in Madison, so there aren't a lot of direct flights to Europe. I don't think any from Madison, so he must be catching something to O'Hare. I don't know.
Something like that.
Yeah, cool.
Well, thanks for pouring some beers. I guess I should start over here. Or
So it seems like you like IPAs.
I do.
Okay,
I do.
Great. So this is our hip hops. This is kind of like our house IPA.
Okay.
7%, kind of modeled after some of the classic leaders of the IPA revolution in the U.S.
Already, I know I've made a great choice. You know when you smell a beer and you're like, "Yep, I'm in the right spot."
Oh yeah, Citra Mosaic, can't really go wrong with those hops these days. Kept it a little bit less bitter than a West Coast, but more bitter than an East Coast. Just kind of like, right in the middle, Midwest style.
Oh yeah, it does have that perfect amount of bitterness, so I feel like I could drink a bunch of these. What is this, in the 6-7%?
Yep, 7% right on the nuts.
Okay,
yep.
Perfect. Well, we're off to a good start.
Absolutely, yeah. This one's like something that we've kind of had since day one. We've made little tweaks to the recipes. We're going to be 8 years old in about a month here, so this is one that we always keep in rotation, but we've kind of decided this past year that we want to have it as a core brand that we're going to brew all the time, make sure we always have it on tap. It's a fan favorite, and amongst the brewers, we really love drinking it too, so we finally feel like we've got it in a place where we're really happy with it, and continue to try to achieve excellence by making micro tweaks to it, but I think it's pretty good where she's at.
So how did you guys get started? Because I was going to be hitchhiking through this way, and I saw Rochester, and I'm like, I might as well see if there's a brewery worth stopping at. And then I saw you guys, I'm like, I need to really stop like this and check you guys out, because the whole forager thing, and it looks like you really care about where your ingredients come from. So how did all that get started?
My history, I grew up in Madison, like I said. My grandma kind of taught me a little bit about things I could pick from the woods, so it was just hidden in the back of my memory for kind of my whole life. And I was working in Lake City, Minnesota, which is a river town on the Mississippi, and got a job, a limited term job for the DNR, creeling trout streams. So essentially I got to go sit at a designated basically opening to the trout streams in southeast Minnesota and just hike up and down them throughout 9 months of the year, talking to anglers about their experience. I wasn't like a warden. I was basically just trying to figure out what they thought about the trout stream and how the DNR could go about rehabilitation projects, stocking programs. They basically used our data to do some of that work in the future. So that really reawakened kind of this understanding of the seasonal change that happens in these really beautiful places in the driftless area here in southeast Minnesota, southwestern Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. Super cool flyover country, a little hidden gem of our area here. And I was homebrewing.
Nice.
And yeah, I had been doing that since I basically turned 20 years old with some friends. And I started using a lot of these wild ingredients in beers we were making with guidance from one of the chefs I was working at a restaurant who owned a spot over in Lake City called Nosh. He was really, really intelligent with the usage of some of these ingredients and showed me how to kind of process them properly and go about adding them to our beer. So that was super fun, and it kind of just sparked this thing for me about I can do something different, because when I lived in the Twin Cities, I was making more traditional styles of beer, And then I really started to get into like wild fermentation and things like that with these ingredients. So that's kind of how, like, I guess the inspiration for Forager started.
Yeah. Have you ever seen hops in the wild?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, I found some of these hops growing along a trout stream. Basically, like, marked it with like a stick and hung a little fishing lure off of the stick. So in the spring, the next year, I could go back and actually dug up a chunk of the rhizome, and then split that. And I've planted it kind of all over the Midwest.
Really?
And we've given it to farms. One of our servers' parents, we put it out at their farm, and it like took off like crazy. So we've been splitting that and just basically growing it for more decoration in the parking lot to kind of cover this fence. We've tried brewing with it, and actually 2 years ago was the only beer we dumped those 2 years because it just didn't have a very good flavor. It smelled awesome, but it didn't really translate into the beer very well. So,
have you been able to identify the strain? I wouldn't even know how to go about that.
Yeah, we were thinking about sending it off to a lab if it was something that like we were excited to use.
Yeah,
I think it's probably like a noble strain that the Germans had, and somehow I know that they were a lot grow wild along like railroad tracks because they were actually carrying them in freight cars when they kind of colonized these areas. And they've kind of hybridized themselves to our climate and just to grow wild. So I think that there's a lot of variance in quality. You probably could find some that are great, but most of them I think are more ornamental than actually like functional in the brew house.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but yeah, they're growing all over the place if you look.
That's cool. I haven't seen them in the wild yet, but I'll be on the lookout now. What should I jump to next?
So do a little like palate cleanse.
Yeah.
This is our Mexican amber lager, more like a Vienna style.
It's got a good color to it.
Yeah, so it's a nice mash bill of Munich, Vienna, Pilsner malt, and like a little tiny bit of chocolate malt in there to kind of accent that like amber color. But just like easy drinking, but nice malty character to it.
Yeah, it doesn't have that overly sweetness that sometimes you can get with a amberish beer like this.
Absolutely. So like fermented with lager yeast, obviously it keeps it nice and crisp and a little more dry. And we don't really put caramel malt in our lagers. We kind of go for those base malts that like lend themselves to like biscuity, like almost like caramel drizzled like English biscuits, where it's like crunchy and dry, but like still has this like essence of caramel to it.
Without getting that syrupy sweetness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that can be kind of nasty sometimes.
Yeah, that was something I learned in homebrewing. I was like, oh, if I want to add this caramel flavor, I just use caramel malts, and a lot of times that would push it too far in a direction, and the drinkability would, I think, be lost.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if drinkability is a word, but I use it all the time.
I've heard it before. Right? If it wasn't a word, it is now.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, so this, we make a lot of beers here for like our like kind of favorite customers and some of our staff members. And Donna's our in-house like bookkeeper, and she loves Negro Modelo. So we asked her like, hey, like we'd like to make a beer for you, and she's like, oh, make a Negro Modelo. And I was like, okay, well, we're gonna do that, but we're gonna like craft it up a hair.
Yeah.
So this was kind of like what we did for that, and I think it turned out really well. We sell a ton of it in the winter, but we have a Mexican light lager on in the summer. And
this is a good summer beer for me.
Absolutely.
I also drink imperial stouts in the summer, so not the best barometer for that. But there's something about it where it's still refreshing, but there's the maltiness really that you can enjoy.
Absolutely. Yep. So that one's fun to make for sure.
Yeah. So you've done a bit of traveling yourself. I was talking to Becca a little bit too. She was telling me about maybe a van trip you got coming up.
Yes. So with Humble Forager, we basically wanted to travel around the country and meet the people who are like selling our beer, because we launched it directly into the pandemic. We started March 2020 is when we made our first batch of beer.
Perfect.
So yeah, we were like, oh, that worked out super well. So we ended up like distributing it to like a pretty like wide range of places that we weren't intending to, just to sell the product. So we have a lot of distributors who I've actually never met in person before. We've just met over email and conference call. Okay. So our intent is to drive the van around and kind of meet all these people and promote our brand out of it. So,
what are the two furthest points? Like, how far of a trip will this be?
So we distribute to like Philadelphia. We deliver beer all the way down to Miami. We deliver it all the way down to San Diego, and also up to Seattle. So it's kind of like we're not quite to Maine yet, but we're almost in like all the farthest reaching places.
That's going to be a fun trip.
Yeah. So we also use it. I've got 3 kids, and they love being in the van and camping. So we take it out there and basically drive them around and explore the world and the country in that.
Oh, so this is an ongoing, you'll do little trips here and there?
Yes.
Okay, I thought maybe you had one giant trip.
We would love to do that, but with 3 kids, my youngest being 6 months, makes it a little more difficult. Hopefully in the future, once they go to school or, get locked up in juvenile detention, we can just be like, all right, see you guys. Like,
perfect.
Yep, for sure.
The guy who gave me a ride today worked at a juvie spot for a while.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Maybe he knows some people who can set you up.
Get a little more free for sure.
A scared straight thing so you can travel.
Yep, exactly.
Perfect.
For sure.
Cool. All right, what do we jump to next here, you think?
So after that one, I'd probably go to the hazy IPA.
Okay.
This one's super fresh. And we made it with our friends up in St. Paul from Barrel Theory Brewing Company.
Okay. Heard of those guys.
Yeah, they're great. I think they make some of the best IPAs, like probably in the country. There's so many big names for IPA out there, but these guys do just an incredible job. So we're always super honored when they want to come down and brew with us here.
Oh yeah.
So
that's a fresh one,
Yeah, super fresh, really like mellow, soft body, but kind of that juiciness that's now over the top. I think some of these hazy IPA producers are making things that, for me, I struggle to like actually drink more than a couple sips of because they're so thick and so
that's
sweet.
That's what I was going to ask. You've had like the real thick, oaty, even lactose kind of ones with vanilla. Even that's like the milkshake style, I guess. But.
Yeah, we've made like 2 milkshake IPAs. They don't do super well here for sales. I'm not sure why. So we kind of like got away from it. We always make hazy IPAs because people really seem to love them, but we aim for like a little bit more of like, not a dry body, but like a medium body to it. So I think it has a little bit more drinkability, but still nice like fruity, juicy flavors. And
this is the style that I prefer. It's a kind of right in the middle, but slightly more juicy than right in the middle. And the thick ones, sometimes I'll appreciate them for what they are, but I just want like a couple sips, Yep. And then sometimes it's just way too thin,
Yes. Yeah.
And it's something different entirely.
and that's, I think, like kind of like a miss on the style. It's like it's supposed to have some sweetness to it to like perceive that juiciness. We've made a couple like session style, like 4.5% hazies, and they end up being super dry. There's just not a lot, like we don't love adding lactose to our beers. There's a couple that we do, but we try to avoid it. So those really light ones tend to have like almost like too little body for the style. So we don't make a lot of those anymore just because we're like, this isn't really hitting the mark. So.
Yeah. Where do you source a lot of your hops from, if not next to rivers?
So most of them come from Germany, Pacific Northwest, New Zealand, kind of are my favorite growing regions. Like most of our lagers are all coming from Germany. We like to get like traditional German hops. I think they're great in lager. For IPAs, I really like Citra, but I also think the New Zealand hops are my favorite. So we look at Citra as kind of like the backbone of a lot of our IPAs. Like put Citra in there, and everything will play off of that really nicely.
Yeah, you kind of can't go wrong with Citra. It's popular for a reason.
Yep, absolutely. So mostly those regions. We get a couple, when we make barley wine, we usually get English hops. We try to get East Kent Golding for that. A couple Czech hops for our Pilsners and things like that. But there's been a push for localization of hop growth around here. We haven't found things that like do quite what we're looking for in the brew house. For IPAs, I guess, for some of the other styles we make, absolutely they work well. But for IPAs, we kind of stick with like really, really good climate and hop growing regions.
Yeah, might as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, so after that, I probably would go to this one here. This is another beer that we've been brewing pretty much since we opened. We do it usually every summer, every other summer. It's called Starry-Eyed Blonde. Belgian Trappist yeast. We use local honey in place of candy syrup. We just kind of like the characteristic of that a little bit more in it. We carbonate it naturally on the yeast in the kegs, so you get a little bit more of that Belgian ester to it. Nice balance between sweet and bitter. And when we're one of the only breweries, I think, that really puts an emphasis on Belgian beers of this style in Minnesota. They're just not that popular anymore.
The aroma right away. Sometimes I can tell how a beer is going to taste just by smelling it. And sometimes I get tricked, but like right as soon as it came to my nose, I was like, because I love a good Belgian blonde, but honestly, 2 out of 3 that I have are like they missed the mark.
Yeah,
just when I have a good one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't like spun the beer, so like carbonate it naturally, and we've found that that's like absolutely crucial to getting more of that ester profile and flavor, is kind of like locking that into the beer. We used to basically just ferment this and then force carbonate it on CO2, and it like lost a whole bunch, and you didn't get quite the like tightness of carbonation that you get doing it the other way. So
and you use local honey. You didn't go like traipsing around looking for beehives, did you? You found somebody who's
I found beehives in the wild, and I'm like, I'm not taking that honey for sure.
For the beer.
Yeah, exactly.
We're doing it.
It's like, I've seen my girl. I don't want to go down like that. Yeah. So it's we've got a lot of great apiaries around here that are constantly offering us good single source varieties of honey. So we make a ton of our different beers with honey. I really love it. It's actually just a kiss of it in the hip hops as well.
Oh, really?
I'd say it's probably, of all ingredients that aren't traditional, honey is probably my favorite adjunct ingredient. I think it offers so much potential in so many different ways to beers.
When do you usually add the honey, in the boil, or?
So sometimes we'll add it at like the whirlpool and the boil for just like looking for a little ABV boost, a little body boost. We'll add it into the fermenter if you want more of like the flavor and aroma of the honey. And I'll crack a bottle with you in a little bit that we actually bottle condition using honey instead of like a priming sugar, like corn sugar.
Oh, cool.
And we've done some experiments about single source honeys with like exact same base beer, but priming it with different types of honey to see like what that gives it in the bottle.
That's awesome.
Which is super fun. And we've found that it's not like super intense results, but there is subtleties that are different in that characteristic. So that's been super cool.
It was cool to hear that you read my book, 6-Pack of Hitchhiking Stories. So you saw the Sierra Nevada one that we did. It was a honey rye. And we used local to Chico. I think it was from Oroville, which is just up the road.
Nice.
And added that in the boil.
Yeah, I think that's like a great combination. And we actually haven't tried, like, other than in our like wild saisons, we haven't used rye and honey directly in a beer before, and I think that sounds like a really great idea.
Works.
Yeah, I'm sure the spiciness kind of and blended with that sweetness could be really awesome.
And there's 12 of us deciding on the beer, so of course it kind of became an IPA. So it's a bunch of Centennial hops, mostly in there.
Well, Sierra Nevada gets good Centennial hops, so
it's
not a bad
Cascade,
choice.
They
Just about the
we
best.
have plenty of that.
And they're the best ones out there. That's awesome.
Well. They make some, or they did make an estate beer every year.
Those were awesome.
Yeah.
I used to always look for those big bottles like back in the day.
I think they had the wax on there too.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how much that adds really to the oxygen not getting in, but it's cool.
We wax dip our like barrel aged stouts because it's like, it just looks really pretty on, like, makes a certain kind of brand, like, it's like, this is your high-end product. And,
it lets you know, from a distance.
There's something
we weren't screwing
different
around with this one. We care about this one.
It's like, we care about all of them, but, like, our barrel-aged beers, we let them ferment usually for, like, 2 months and do, like, a real careful, like, fluctuating fermentation to kind of, like, just stress the yeast a little bit and get some unique flavors, and then we barrel age it for like a minimum of like 18 months now. Like, we won't even touch anything in these before that. So it's like, by the time some of these beers are done, like we just bottled yesterday a 42-month barrel aged old ale, and it's just crazy. And I feel like the beer deserves that like wax stamp of approval. You know, it's like you've gone through this much time, like you get wax on you.
Yeah.
Whereas like IPAs are great and we care just as much about you guys, but you're fresh and you're young and we like can mass produce you. These other things are like, we can't mass produce this. This is like a labor of love and patience and time and
put the bow on it. You know?
Exactly.
Is there anything in here right now? Kind of
all of these are filled up.
Do you know what's in this one, or would you?
Yeah, this one is half of the barrel is a 2-mash barley wine, so like a really strong barley wine, and then we filled the other half of it with our friends from 8th State Brewing Company. They're in Greenville, South Carolina. Okay. So we made a beer with them, and the reason we do that sometimes is just like out of serendipitous, like, oh, we don't have like enough beer to fill this whole barrel up because we've already filled some other ones. So we like blend into barrels, and it actually ends up being, a lot of the times, those are some of our best beers. Like they're super cool. And we can't recreate it ever. So like a lot of these end up being like single barrel releases and stuff like that. So
that's badass.
Yeah, each one of these is like kind of different. So we don't, when we make barrel aged beer, we don't brew something and like put a name on it like it's gonna be that when it's done. We basically like make these base beers, and then as we taste them throughout their lifespan, essentially like watch their flavor profiles and then blend for a finished product and then name it that way. So yeah, it's just, we've always done that. It's just been kind of our approach. Instead of like trying to like force something that maybe isn't great. You know, like if we made a beer and we're like, oh, this is gonna get coffee and cinnamon and coconut like 2 years before. It's like, how do I know what this is actually gonna be like?
You're gonna probably end up changing your mind anyways. So.
Yep, 100%.
Why kid yourself?
Yep. So.
All right.
So from that one, I would go to this. This is Cold Side of the Moon.
Cold Side of the Moon. I like the name.
Yep. We like riff off of like stuff that we love all the time, and like I've been listening to a lot of Pink Floyd again recently because it always makes it back into the rotation like once every 2 years, heavy and hard. And so this is actually a lager. So it's fermented cold, but with a new yeast strain that's like been hybridized to accent like thiols, which are kind of like passion fruity.
That's what I'm getting something in there,
guava, papaya kind of flavors to it.
That's just the yeast. There's no fruit in here.
No fruit, yeah. So the yeast just does that, and then we used talus hops in this one, which are kind of like lemon limey, anyways. So it's actually a lager, but I think people in our industry have been trying to sell India Pale Lager. By not calling it India Pale Lager because IPL never worked. Like people never bought it, so now everyone's rebranding it Cold IPA, which I kind of have a problem with because it's like IPA implies it's an ale and it's not. But I mean, whatever.
It's one of the letters in the acronym.
Exactly.
A for ale.
So it's like we're kind of just like following that right now. But I like these styles a lot. I think, like I'd said before, the hazy IPAs can be a bit like much for me, and I think these like offer a really great kind of balance of like those tropical juicy tones you get from a hazy IPA with the drinkability of like a West Coast just regular IPA where it's like clean, crisp, but you still get a nice hoppy bite. Like it's a cool style, and I hope it can stick around because I like making them.
This seems like it'd be a regular for regulars. You know, people would come in here and be just like, I'm drinking 4 or 5 beers, like, you know what I want.
Oh, yeah.
This is the one.
And that's kind of what we're going with. I mean, like the 7% in that beer versus the 7% in this beer, that one just drinks so much easier.
This
and
is 7%?
Yeah.
It doesn't taste like it.
I know. That one, that's like the dangerous piece of it. We have a buddy up in the cities at a brew pub called Bricksworth. He, strangely enough, used to work at Barrel Theory, and now he's a head brewer at this brew pub. And he's just making incredible cold IPAs. So we kind of like, hey, like, what are you doing with these? And he's like, oh, let's make a beer together. So we went up, brewed with him, and we used like a large percentage of rice, like flaked rice in the grist, and it lightens it up and gives it this super clean crispness, and lets hops just kind of ride on top of that. And super awesome. So I got to give a shout out to Tyler for coaching us down the path of cold IPA.
For the second season on hopping, ended in Portland, and
Nice.
Pono Brewing brewed this beer for us, and it was a cold IPA.
Cool.
Some Sabro hops. That's the one that stood out to me. That's first time I had Sabro hops. I was in I wish I could remember the brewery, but I was in Bozeman, Montana, and it was a smash beer.
Nice.
So when I tasted it, like I knew there was no coconut in it because it was a smash beer, and I knew.
Yep.
And luckily the brewer was like right over the railing. I was like, dude, he's like right. Like,
Oh yeah.
It's a wild kind of hop.
Absolutely. We've had like mixed results with that in our past. I think that like it can be a really cool hop on its own, but I also feel that like in a mix of hops, it can kind of play weird, you know, because coconut doesn't go with everything.
Yeah.
But like Sabro and Talus, great combination, coconut and lime. Like, you know, those things work. So you're going to get some unique profiles from that. And yeah, I think that overall, like IPAs are so fun. Like they're not usually my beverage of choice, but I like really love making them to try to like achieve these cool combinations of flavor with all the hops and now all these fun yeasts and stuff that are in the game too.
Have you played with Kvike yeast?
It's one we haven't done, and it's kind of silly because we have some ambient temperature, like 125 gallon fermenters, which would be perfect for that.
Right.
To do some small batch testing with it, but for some reason we just have never done it yet, and we probably should because I think
it's an interesting one.
Well, for sure.
I've homebrewed with it a few times, and actually the first season of hopping, we homebrewed in Phoenix. We made an IPA, 5-gallon batch with my buddy, but we took a stainless steel growler and filled some of the wort in there, pitched it with Kvike yeast, and literally hitchhiked 1,000 miles with it, like fluctuating temperatures from probably 100 something degrees, or no, it wasn't that hot, but it was pretty hot, down to like almost freezing. And
oh my gosh, that's awesome.
The first few days, like burping it, and it was, you know, we got picked up by one guy, and there was a squeal, and he's like, "Oh, that's my car." I'm like, "No, that's a bomb that I have happened to be traveling with."
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
And then just didn't stop burping it. And by the time we got to my buddies in Sacramento, there's footage of us opening, not knowing if it was going to be like flat, explode in our faces, and it was one of the most perfectly carbonated beers I've ever had.
I bet.
Like kind of dumb luck. But
that natural carbonation is so great, you know. And it's like if there was a way that you had like a hydrometer that you could clean in some alcohol and like dip it in there and be like, oh, it's right there, seal it and like let it go. Like I think that's great. And what a cool experiment too, you know, just like let it ride. You know, like,
but if you do, I have just put a heat lamp against it when I'm not hitchhiking with it.
Yep, for sure.
3 or 4 days from brewing, bottling, and drinking. Like in 4 days,
that's what I've heard, which is so crazy.
It doesn't make sense. It breaks homebrewers' brains. Like, but
I think for homebrewing, like when I was doing it at like kind of a primitive level, like you're just letting stuff ambiently ferment in some area that ideally is 70 degrees.
You throw it in a closet, you're like, I've been responsible.
Exactly. It's like there's no light on it. Okay, it's as good as it can be. But then, I think that offers just an incredible opportunity, especially for home brewers, to like be making super good, super clean beer quickly.
Yeah, because the turnover, it's like, I've talked to cooks, and in a way, cooking is a lot like brewing, except for you can cook the same thing 2 or 3 times a day if you're really a freak. Like, at least every night. And then after a week, you're like, I've got the best chicken parm recipe ever.
Oh, yeah.
But with a beer, it's like, it could take a year or years, depending on the beer, especially like an imperial stout. That's why it's cool that you guys are letting stuff sit for like 42 months. And, and over time, like, become an expert.
Yeah, there's like aspects to our brewery and restaurant that like are like, we need to have this well-rounded tap list for the general public who comes in here. And Rochester looks at us, I think, as a restaurant that has a good variety of beer. And like everywhere outside of Rochester looks at us as a brewery that has good food. And because they look at us for like this barrel program and some of these other things, whereas most of our locals are coming here to drink, cold IPA or like Mexican light lager, different rotating seasonals, where the majority of the customers who come in for our barrel age releases are not from Rochester, but are from like surrounding states and some other countries as well.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it works out good.
Cool. Jump to this one, I'm guessing?
Yep, that'll be great. Yeah, so this is a line of sours we call Gummies Make Us Likeable. And essentially, the story behind it is we get invited to this rare beer festival up in St. Paul. We're a pretty young brewery, and we're just having a good time. And one of the owners of the festival comes up, and he's like, hey, my brother's got some gummies. And we're like, well, sounds good, give us some. So we gobble it down a bunch of gummies, and this festival is a charity for Pints for Prostate, which basically raises awareness of like prostate cancer and offers free health screenings for men across the country. Super great organization. We support them every year in different festivals. And the owner and like CEO of that charity comes up to us, and we're just chopped up, like been drinking, gummies are hitting, we're grinning ear to ear, and we like meet this guy, don't really even remember it, and then the other owner of the festival comes up and he's like, hey, Rick just like loved you guys, he said you're so likable, he'd love it if you'd come out to his Denver Rare Beer Festival in Colorado this year. And I look at my buddy and I was like, guess gummies make us likable. And so like we just named the beer after our friend Mark from Chop Liver Beer Festivals. After that, we've been making it as like kind of our core sour beer that we go with flavors. Sometimes like gummies you can buy in the grocery store, sometimes other things. So this is inspired essentially by like a rhubarb strawberry apple crisp or apple crumble.
It smells like a pie.
Yep, absolutely. So,
but it's got that little that pucker that's not like extreme.
Yes. Because like any good pie, it's not only sugar. It's got to have a little bit of acidity to balance it out. So however you get that. I think, again, going back to my grandma and my mother, like they every spring and summer would make strawberry rhubarb crisp, and then in the fall would make apple crisp. And sometimes we'd have extras that we'd freeze, and we'd bring them both out at like a holiday gathering, and I'd always be putting them together and like eating it with whipped cream and stuff. And like, so I was like, let's make this. So we had a little bit of cinnamon. And
you almost get the whipped cream on the nose a little bit.
Absolutely. And there's no lactose in this, nothing like that, but it's vanilla beans and cinnamon, which that combination to me kind of offers this like almost like graham crackery crust kind of characteristic.
That's exactly, the crust is what you're getting.
Yep.
Crust and whipped cream, the vanilla comes through, just enough cinnamon in there, you're like, something happy's about to happen. Right. If you're like blindfolded, you're like, ah.
Absolutely. So the strain we use for our kettle souring, we still do kettle sour because we basically have like a wild lactobacillus strain that we got off the skins of some blackcap raspberries.
Oh wow! That you foraged?
Yep. Yeah. So we foraged that, and then essentially had created I guess it's not necessarily a spontaneous fermentation, but a wild fermentation by making a Flanders red, putting it into a small 5-gallon oak barrel, and then putting in a bunch of blackcap raspberries to spark the fermentation.
Okay.
So after that, we took the dregs out of the bottom and sent it off to our buddies at Shell Brewing Company over at New Ulm. They're like the second oldest family-run brewing company behind Yuengling in the country. Super cool, old, traditional brewery. Really cool spot. Really brilliant people over there. And they isolated all the different yeast strains for us in their lab. And then we sent those off to the Brewing Science Institute in Colorado, and they bank those strains for us. So like if we ever were to lose it, we could get those back, and they're kind of like our like proprietary strains.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so that's been pretty neat. So a lot of people now, I think there's faster, easier ways than like kettle souring with lactobacillus, but we really like the characteristic that our base has from that yeast. So we haven't kind of transitioned to cut those corners yet because we like what we're getting out of this, and it's got a cool kind of like vibe for the foraging story as well.
Yeah, so, this is cool. I mean, how many have I had? 6 in, and it's 6 for 6 and like a high 6 for 6. Like, I'm so glad I saw you guys. Like, I didn't look on any beer lists or anything like that. I don't know how I hadn't heard of you guys. But when I looked up Rochester, I saw the Forager name, and that kind of caught my attention. And when I looked at the website and I looked at some of the beers in the story, I was like, this looks like a real winner.
Cool, man.
And now that I'm here, it's just like, you guys are actually like, in the top probably 1 or 2 percentile of breweries on the planet. Like you have to be.
Really, really nice of you to say that. I appreciate that.
And in Rochester, Minnesota, like unassuming, kind of.
That's I think why a lot of people don't know about us is because we're not in a big metro area.
But now you're saying, you know, from Philly to Miami to San Diego to Seattle, like people must be figuring it out.
So that's kind of the interesting thing. And with Humble Forager, we don't want it to be like this huge brewery. Like that's why we like to contract. We're contracting now at 4 different facilities. We started at Octopi, which is just outside of Madison in Wanakee, and they're like a huge facility. So we make our like hard seltzers there. We call them buzzed seltzers because we use local honey to kind of back sweeten it. And they produce those for us. And we're producing some beer up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin at the Brewing Project. We're producing our barrel-aged stuff at Fair State up in St. Paul. And then we're producing our lagers at Udapils in Minneapolis. So there's a lot of breweries, I think, right now that have a little bit of open tank space and residency in their fermenters. So we're super excited to work with great breweries to essentially like make a little bit of beer there and get out those styles that each brewery really excels at. So it works super well for us, it works super well for them, and we don't have to open a new brewery. If I wanted to brew beer all day, I'd just brew beer here at Forager again and not do that. But there was a demand for our products kind of pre-COVID, so we worked with Minnesota. Minnesota wasn't really working with us to find a way to get that done, change the laws. So we were like, we'll just go to other states and other breweries and work with them.
It's not that far away.
No, and it's actually been like a great relationship. I've met some really, really awesome people. I think I've taught each of those breweries some things. They've taught me some things. So it's a really collaborative effort at the end of the day. And we just like to have our beer out in the right spots across the country. We're not trying to grow it into any huge, crazy brand. We're just trying to provide a good product for people who want to support a brand that uses real ingredients, doesn't use artificial flavorings, and essentially like we give a little bit of our money back every year to different charities and like kind of youthful organizations that promote education for kids about nature and wildlife and things like that.
Hell yeah.
So
just generally great for the world.
Absolutely, yeah. We just like
respect that.
Beer's awesome. I love beer, but I also think that I love our wild places much, much more. And it's great to enjoy a beer out in them as well, but educating children in a digital world today to respect like the wild places and understand its importance, I think is probably one of the most important things we can do as humans. So if we can give something back to that, makes me feel much better about producing a drug. It's good. But
that's perfect, man.
Nice.
Love it.
So for dessert, this is Basket of Puppies.
Basket of Puppies.
Yep. So it's a big beastly beer, 13.8%. It's actually
13.8, you said?
Yep. And it's actually an imperial porter at that level. For us, that means we don't use any roasted barley or black malt in it. It's just chocolate malts, caramel malts, and base malt. And then there's just like heaps and heaps of toasted and raw coconut, vanilla, and almonds in that one. So we just released that about a month and a half ago. And it's kind of just like a liquid candy bar. Like very rich, very decadent, and great for sharing with a big group of people after dinner because like a 750 of that to solo dome it. It's a lot of calories.
No, that's the pass around.
Yep, exactly. Just like everybody gets 3-4 ounces and it's perfect.
The almond is coming through. How did you put the almond in there?
So since we have a full kitchen in the back, we just buy whole almonds and then we chop them up and roast them in the back. Let them cool down and throw them into like a big stainless tank that we have that we call our adjunct tank. It's got a screened false bottom on it, similar to a mash tun, and then we just recirculate the base beer past the nuts, and then once we like put a little tasting valve on the side of it, and as we get it to the flavor profile that we like, we pump or like basically pressurize the adjunct tank and push all the beer back into the fermenter, clean out those almonds, and then put coconut in it. So we basically if we're using vanilla, we like scrape the beans of their caviar and just use the caviar, and then recirculate that in the beer itself. But then with these bigger, kind of like harder adjuncts like coconut chips or almonds or whatever else you might be using, we use this kind of screen tank to just recirculate the beer past it.
Okay.
It works great. I think being able to roast them fresh in house makes a huge difference as well.
Something like those almonds, once the beer goes through it, are they pretty much void of use?
They kind of like pull on, like don't have their oily content anymore.
Okay, so you can't like reuse them in a dessert because they've lost all.
We've tried and it doesn't turn out super good.
Well, that means you put all the essence into the beer.
Yes,
so
that's kind of it. Like when you taste
successful.
those almonds or coconut afterwards, and it just is like kind of like this like odd, moist nut texture that doesn't have any of the delicious oils anymore. Like, okay, we did our job, but we're just going to turn this into compost now. So that works out pretty good. Having a kitchen on site is wonderful for producing your own unique adjunct additions and making sure they're treated properly.
With the kitchen too, do you still have the Forager vibe in that?
Absolutely. So we do a lot of covers each night here. Like we employ about 80 people at this place, which is a lot.
That is a lot.
So we're open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day, except for
8 a.m.
Yeah, so we have our coffee shop up front. We do a little breakfast, and then kind of transition to our lunch dinner menu at 11. So as often as we can, we are trying to use something that's wild foraged, but I'd say it only makes it onto the menu for specials, just because with the ethics of foraging, you don't want to go out there and like clear cut a field of ramps or something.
Well, it's literally the amount of people you're saying are in here. Just picture that many people per day, just like
exactly. So it's like we use them seasonally as they come available in some cool specials. So like if somebody comes in and has a big bag of morels, like awesome, like we'll buy them from you, but we're just gonna do like a mushroom sausage pizza until they're gone, and then they're gone.
That's badass though.
It's cool.
Especially for people who live here, because they know they can always come in and be like, get something different.
Yep.
Different beer, different
for sure
entree, whatever.
And we do beer dinners with our chef every like 2 to 3 months here. And that's really a great opportunity for us to showcase some of like the more wild forage stuff, because we'll only be doing like, a maximum of 100 heads. So we can like break it down and like preserve some of these things, like the black cap raspberries. It's like, if we go out and get a bunch of them, we can turn them into an awesome gastrique and then save that and like put it with a local duck breast on that special like beer dinner menu. So that's kind of like the best opportunity for us to really like focus efforts on foraged ingredients. And we've done that a lot in the past, where we'll go out that day and be like, we're gonna pick watercress because we know this spot, and we're gonna just get enough for the dinner tonight and do this awesome Lyonnaise salad with watercress or something.
That's badass.
Yeah, it's super fun, and it like takes us back to like the roots of kind of our brand and like what we want to be, but doing it in like a sustainable, ethical way, which is fun as well, and like I think important. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I like the whole thing you got going on.
Sweet. So I do have this really special little bottle here.
I saw that over there.
But it's still 5 degrees too cold. So I'm going to go get one more bottle of beer, and I'll be right back, because there's something I really want you to try as well.
All right. For it.
Cool. So this one, we do a lot of like wild fermented beers as well. Kind of based off the Belgian like lambic tradition and some kind of like more rustic farmhouse saisons. So this one here is called Driftless Woodline.
Nice name.
And we essentially did a spontaneous ferment by using a Belgian style cool ship out on our back patio in the winters. And
you have a cold ship? Or?
Yep. Yeah, we have a couple little ones that we made that work for our brew size really well. So do the cool ship and then pump it into some used wine barrels. These ones happen to be red wine from Napa. And then after that, this was just a single barrel, but ended up being really, really nice on its own. So we got some really cool purple raspberries from Hoke Orchard, a little farm around here, and let it do like a maceration on the purple raspberries, and then bottle conditioned it with wildflower honey from a local apiary.
Oh, wow.
But it's going to be super rustic, really berry forward, but not sweet. It's going to be bone dry and just kind of like represent the terroir of Rochester, Minnesota and the southeast Minnesota. So we love these beers. People don't seem to like to buy them that much these days. They want hazy IPAs and, fruited sours that are done quickly, but we have a huge passion and a big program for this kind of beer. So
awesome. Stoked to try it.
Cheers, man. Yeah. Yeah, for me, I absolutely love this style of beer.
Spots.
It really does. It's so good with food as well, as far as like if you're thinking about having wine like with a meal, like our wild beers offer something super incredible for, like I was saying, like a fatty Duroc pork chop with something on it, and you add a little bit of this to your like deglaze in the pan. It's like it's a beautiful thing to cook with.
I had pork chops last night with my buddy. This would have been
nice,
ideal.
Yep, yeah, something that's just like a little fatty, and you have something with like that gentle acid, but also like big fruity dryness. Just like pairs so well with it. So
yeah, do you get a lot of beer travelers in here that'll come and get stuff like this? Like maybe not the locals, but
more so when we do big releases, we'll usually see like a kind of a spike in sales on this kind of stuff, because it just ends up, I think, hitting that niche a little bit. But there's been also like a big, I think, push to actually get Belgian lambics into liquor stores here. Like for instance, Dre Fontenin and their lambics are like kind of everywhere now. So our price point to buy the fruit from local farmers and to age it, for 18 months in a barrel beforehand, it hovers around the same price point as like some of the best producers in the world. So I think it's also like a hard choice for a lot of people to be like, why would I buy this instead of buying something from Dre? But it's different at the end of the day. It's kind of like a Midwestern take on the similar style. But
the artwork is pretty sick too.
So our local artist, I asked him to do like acrylic pours a number of years ago for this kind of branding, because I think that it's like we're just letting it be organic and all natural. So what better than acrylic pour to kind of represent that, just like, let time and place dictate where this goes. The artwork is essentially trying to be a representation of that as well. That's something that just like happens because things came together, So
I like that. As a traveler, that's like kind of how it all is.
Absolutely,
things just come together.
Yep, for sure.
Have you been to like Brussels or Cantillon or anything?
I have been to Brussels. I've been to Cantillon, I think 2 times. I love it there. The first 2 times, I've been there 3 times, because the first 2 times I went, we were able to like eat cheese and sausage there that they had made like with their goose with like a local creamery and a local like sausage maker, and we were like nibbling on this and drinking all these awesome beers, and it was so great. And I remember the last time I had been there, it was like they were apparently like the health department was like, you can't like have these for sale here anymore. And we were like, so we're just drinking lambic all day, which like if you don't have anything else in your stomach, like you can kind of get a sour gut, and it just like made the experience kind of like we have to leave to like eat now. Where before we could like just like nibble and drink and like stay there for hours. On the
Is
last
it because they got spiders and stuff kicking around?
I have no idea what it was, but it was super odd. I was like, why don't you have the cheese anymore? They're like, they're not allowing us to do that anymore. I was like, serve cheese in Europe? You can't? What? Everywhere has cheese.
Like, that seems like an attack.
No, it was super weird. So, that was like I love their beers. They're obviously a huge inspiration for these products that we make, and yeah, I kind of wish that I had more time to just explore this style of beer, but you know, we only do it once or twice a year now, just because we got to make what sells, and we can squirrel some of this away and like let it age and develop and become super beautiful. But you know, at the end of the day, it's like we end up saving it for like special occasions, which is great to have it. And there just aren't really a lot of producers of this around anymore. People are
not a lot, and maybe it's because what you say, some people are just, or most people are looking for hazies and or just a easy drinking beer. So I guess it's harder to sell, which is a shame because it's so great. But I guess,
yeah, I think the U.S. is like mildly addicted to sugar, and this has like none left in it. So it's kind of like, wait, there's no. It smells like there's gonna be. It's like gonna be like drinking a melted fruit roll up, but it doesn't taste like a melted fruit roll up. You know?
So. But are there some spots that you're like really looking forward to for these kind of beers on your various trips that you'll be making for Forager?
So I've definitely been to a couple as I've traveled around. I've been really fortunate in my life to have been brought up in a family that like all we spent any money on was saving our miles from a credit card to be able to travel and doing lots of road trips. My parents, my grandparents, that was like all they really wanted to do. So I got to kind of like explore and camp all over like the country when I was pretty young, and as like I became an adult, I like obviously just it was embedded in me to like do that. So I love traveling, and I went to DeGard out in Tillamook, Oregon, a number of years ago, like kind of right when we were starting, and Trevor out there was super kind and was willing to kind of show me around in the barrel room and like talk to me about his processes.
That's awesome.
Which was super cool. Levi Funk down in Madison was kind of a big inspiration for me as well, because he was doing cool ship in the Midwest that was really, really awesome. Allagash up in Portland, Maine. They were just doing incredible wild beers and spontaneous stuff as well. Jeff Stuffing's down at Jester King, stuff that he's doing.
You've made the rounds, man.
Is super good. I've really searched out breweries that embrace wild beer because I think it's something that's like hard to do well, and it takes tons of time and tons of patience. And I've had a lot of bad ones, so it's like kind of like it's really been nice to meet these people who are super passionate about doing it the right way, and not just being like, we're going in blind and like we're gonna do this and that, and like they end up. I've had so many that are not high quality beer, but then there are these producers out there that are doing like a brilliant job of it, and it's just been really fun. Like I know Troy Casey quite well. Out at Casey Brewing Company in Glenwood Springs, and his approach to wild beers are super beautiful as well. So it's kind of a small group of us now who like are still like trying to make this push and like believe in it, and like even Troy, who started off as like a completely 100% wild brewery doing everything in oak, is like has to make IPAs and has to make lagers and stouts, which is great because he makes awesome ones, but it's like you can't really pay the bills anymore like making only this style of beer.
But it's nice to make this style of beer. It takes so much more effort, so that when you're making an IPA, you're just like, I don't want to say accidentally, but like all the intricacies, like you're doing just like you're making it perfect because you know how to, and it's easy almost.
It's easy because you just dump the stuff that isn't good, and you take that hit, and like you just know that it's not always going to work out. But then as like a painter learns to blend colors better, like we learn to blend our barrels better, like the more time we have and the more understanding we have about like their futures. And I think just like, you know, when you're out on the road, like your life experience gives you such like a database of like smells and tastes and things that like come through. Like when we're tasting our barrels, like one of our brewers was like, this reminds me of this bowling alley when I was like 17 years old, where it had this like whiskey stain on the carpet and this cigarette smoke in the air, and we were like, what?
Okay.
Like, it's like, we can't get there, but I'm so glad that you can, because it's like so many of these beers, their flavors and aromas are so different than like fast produced like general beer, that it is like an experiential based thing, and like what you've done in your life, what you've tasted, like where you've been, like really can guide the experience of like blending these beers together. And it becomes like extremely like romantic to me in this way of like something so different and something so unique that's like meant for time and place. It's just cool, you know?
And I guess what I'm saying too is when you're like an artist like you are, and then someone's like, can you paint my fence? You're like, yeah, I'm gonna do an excellent job. Like, and that's what like, you know, some of the IPAs and IPLs called, you know, like to you it might just be a fence, and you just like go above and beyond. You're like, how's that fence? And I'm like, oh my God, that fence is the best painted fence I've ever had. You're like, oh, come into the museum. Check out my other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this isn't just whitewashing. Yeah. But, you know, every beer also has a place. And for people who love crushing Busch Light, more power to them. I can't tell them that's wrong at all. Like, if that's what they like to do, that's what they like to do, and it sounds good. But for all the other people who like exploring a little bit more off the beaten path, like, we're absolutely the place to come to. In this region, there's other breweries doing it all over the world now. But yeah, we love to like kind of represent like our passions and our experiences through like our craft of beer.
Yeah.
So
comes through.
Yeah. Okay, so on to this final little bottle.
All right.
So we are preparing for our 8th anniversary, which is going to be in just over a month on September 9th here.
Okay.
We're releasing 5 different barrel-aged beers, and this is one of them. This is called Zora, which is the name of my 6-month-old daughter.
Okay.
And this is a black barley wine.
Black barley wine.
So essentially, there's going to be a little tiny bit of like vanilla in this one too.
Yeah.
Because it's actually like we were bottling Zora, and then we transitioned the bottling line to Silas, which is my 2-year-old son's name, and that's the 42-month-old ale with vanilla, black raspberry, and maple syrup.
Okay.
So like this bottle like got probably 90% of Zora in it, but then like the top of it was the little splash of Silas as well before we transitioned into the new beer. So for us, black barley wine is basically I haven't told anybody this, so this is like new to you, like this barrel where it's like filled with half barley wine, and then we top it off with either imperial Scotch ale, stout, wheat wine, porter, a number of different other base beers that we make. So it's like blended in the barrel. So over 50% of this beer is barley wine, and then the rest of it is like the little threads that were added on top of the barley wine in the barrels, giving it like this kind of like blended stout, porter, old ale, barley wine feel to it.
Yeah, it's got a barley wine smell, but it's got like the richness of a stout coming through too.
For sure. So a lot of these beers that we've been doing recently, we don't carbonate at all. We want them to be still representations of like literally what we're tasting out of the barrel directly to you. And I feel that like when they warm up, they are just better without any carbonation. We've traditionally carbonated every one of our barrel-aged stouts and barley wines, but we've been getting more and more into just leaving them still and being like representations of directly from the barrel. And I love it. I think they're super good, and just kind of offer that experience that we get here, you know, when we're tasting it.
Cool, let's give it a shot. Nice. It's got the body to it. It's got a chocolatey vibe going on. Yeah, that's pretty decadent.
Yeah, 14.1%. The barrel ranges of age were like 28 months down to 18 with all the different stuff. But yeah, when we were blending this one, it was like we have all these different barrels that are mixed barrels, and I'd gotten to some of them that were like, yeah, this one doesn't quite add to it. So we only selected like just the best threads that we really had, but it was kind of about like balance, but also tons of little subtleties in there. So we're like, okay, this one is offering like this little weird kind of like fresh tanned leather. This one's adding this like little bit of like almost fruity cherry note. This one's adding like pipe tobacco. This one's adding a tiny bit of coffee. And
it's getting a little cinnamon in there too.
Absolutely, the spice notes that we get from some of the barrels are awesome. So yeah, it's super fun to do the blending and kind of come up with like, here's all these finished products that aren't one-dimensional. Every once in a while we'll get like a barrel that's just perfect on its own, and it'll be like, we're just going to release that barrel without anything else in it. But a lot of the times we're like, these 5 things create something much greater than the sum of like their individual parts.
Well, that's the goal, right? Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, it's fun. But yeah, these are definitely meant to be shared. These aren't even released for like off-site. Again, Minnesota beer laws are pretty weird. So these are
they
for
have an ABV
on-site
cap
consumption.
or something?
No, it's actually strangely enough, like Minnesota doesn't allow brew pubs to sell anything off sale smaller than a 750, which is like really weird. Distribution breweries can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But because we're a brew pub and we're like super community focused, because we have wine and spirits and like offer a bunch of other things. We have guest taps here.
Yeah.
For some reason, the state thinks that we're going to change all these other laws by allowing us to like offer our consumers like a smaller bottle, which I find absurd and quite frankly like irresponsible. Like our state is forcing people to buy this size vessel, which not everybody wants to drink that much at one time.
Yeah.
And if I'm making a 14.1% thing,
you have to,
it's like, yeah.
What if an individual wants
to just have that at night because their wife wants to drink wine or doesn't drink because she's pregnant or just doesn't have alcohol? Why can't they choose? Why can't the consumer choose?
The state by state and even different countries, all the alcohol laws is just beyond me. I don't understand it.
Yeah, we've been dealing with it for a while, and their only response is, well, just change to a distribution brewery. And it's like, well, we don't want to be that because we have a huge community that supports us for the other things they can get other than just beer here. So if you're a brewery, like a distribution brewery in Minnesota, you can't have wine, you can't have hard alcohol, and you can't have guest taps. So for instance, this beer that we made with Barrel Theory, I can give them some crowlers for free and they can drink it, but I couldn't give them a keg of it to serve in their tap room.
What?
But if they made that collaboration up there, I could buy a keg for them and serve it in our tap room. But they could sell you a 12-ounce, a 4-pack of 16-ounce pint cans out of their tap room with the collab. I couldn't do that. I have to sell it in a 750 milliliter can.
Mind-boggling, dude.
And absurd. It really is. It's like one of those things where it's like there's no reason for it, and no one's really been able to ever tell me why that's a good idea. Like, so it's been like mildly frustrating, but at the end of the day, we'll just package these things like this, and then if people come in and they want to buy a little tiny bottle, they can enjoy it here. You know?
Yeah, so there you go.
Yep.
Something.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for sharing all these beers with me.
Absolutely, Kenny.
It's definitely worth the trip.
I appreciate you coming through, man. Yeah, I really enjoyed your book and look forward to like more stories.
I'm stoked that you read the book. It's like I got in touch with you guys yesterday.
Yep.
To walk in and be like, read your book.
Oh, yeah. It's great. So, yeah, cool. I appreciate you coming in and checking us out. And
yeah, I'll definitely be back, and I'm sure almost everyone watching this is going to try to make a trip up here.
Sweet, dude.
Happy days.
Right on, brother.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.